Okay. Okay. So Sharif,
So,
how was prayer?
yeah, good man. I was just obviously I had to go and pray, so I couldn't hear the discussion. So, have you convinced him yet about belief in a God yet?
Oh, I'm there. I'm there with a necessary being.
Does a necessary being? Do you believe a
Trying
necessary
to get
being
into
has a?
stage 2, brother.
Do you believe that a necessary being needs to have a will?
No.
Can you
Why is?
explain
Yeah, go
explain
on,
why not?
Jake.
I don't think reality has a will. Reality to me is the causal necessary principle for the existence of the universe. So with reality is the equivalent to God. Reality causes, I wouldn't use the word created, but I would use the word causes, matter, space, time, consciousness, all those things. I've been looking into something called neutral monism. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yes. But what do you mean by reality causes?
Reality.
What
so
is
so
reality in that? Is it just like a I mean, what is reality in that equation?
a plane of existence where every contingent thing is derived from.
But you understand that the term existence is a predicate. It's something that you give as a property of a being. It's not something that exists
So I
Yeah.
can't use existence as a noun.
Well, and the way you're using it as well.
as an adjective.
would-
You are using it as an adjective, isn't it?
Well, yeah, okay.
And I guess you could also, this is still just referring to the fact that anything that has existence, you're sort of putting it into that. But we've already spent a bit of time discussing why there's a distinction, and you've already conceded to this. There's a distinction between two different kinds of existence, that being possible existence or contingent being, and the necessary being. So when you're describing existence in the way you are, you're just putting all of these things into one category, despite there being a huge distinction between that which gives rise to possible existence and the thing that's making them come into being itself. So you've already said that there is a necessary being. And to say, well, existence doesn't have a will, that's to completely forget all the argumentation that's been leading up to this distinction between different kinds of existent beings, that is necessary and possible, and to say, well, this as a whole can't have a will. We've not been arguing for that. We've admitted, yes, there is this thing called existent beings. Now, if you go into that bubble of things, are there different kinds of existent beings? Yes, there's a necessary being and there's a possible being, or possible beings, plural. And we're saying that the necessary has to have a will, and we gave the reasoning there. So if this necessary being is independent, yet it is bringing things into being, there is this strange occurrence here of the lack of causality, in the sense that this being isn't being acted upon in the same way. So I know you're a determinist, yeah? Are you still there?
I've moved on that too.
Alhamdulillah. But even if you were to
Well,
argue,
let me just clarify real quick. I am a hard incompatibilist in the same sense as Jake.
you're always going hard, bro.
We just sit on different ends of the spectrum. I am a hard incompatibilist that negates free will, that leans towards determinism, negates free will and or moral responsibility.
Okay. Right,
But you understand, just in that when you say existence is the necessary existence, you're using existence there as an adjective. Exactly, it doesn't make sense when you say existence.
No,
is
but
the
reality is. So what I would need to do is find a way to separate reality from existence. Find a distinction between those two things, because I'm not necessarily trying to say that existence is existence or reality is reality.
Yeah, exactly.
even the way you're
So
referring
even
to
if
it is
if I turn around, if I say reality is that which exists as either a possible existence or a necessary existence, which I think what Joseph was saying before, then yes, that's what we agree, that reality is that which exists as a possible existence or as a necessary existence. Now, all we're saying is, okay, you've got possible existence which are possible and need to be actualized to have a particular attribute, or that they began to exist, and a necessary existence which is eternal, which had to do the actualizing. Now, the actualizing or the causing of these possible things it required a choice. Otherwise, these possible things are no longer possible. They're necessary as well.
And
Not
also,
only that, yeah, go, sorry, Joseph.
and also, so the idea that existence doesn't necessarily have to have a will, we're conceding that with the idea that possible existence can have a will and cannot have a will. That is, some of possible existent beings,
So by possible existence, you mean contingent beings?
Yeah. So they can be their non-existence is not inconceivable. So that these things can come into being and they can cease to be. They can originate.
I can concede that they have a will. I would just say that their will isn't derived from free choice. Like their will.
Right, but then that complicates it even further, because if you want to say, because I'm saying that there are things like a stone doesn't necessarily have a will. I'm happy to concede that. We can go down this route of panpsychism and things like that, but I'm happy to say that there are things in existence that don't have a will. And if you're saying that, then we can say, it's not necessarily the case that existence has to have a will. Well, because we can point at things in reality that don't have a will, and so that's fine. But then again, we've already made a distinction between the possible and the necessary, and the only reason you can say, well, reality doesn't necessarily have to have a will, that's a consequence of this understanding that, well, possible existence may not have a will, and so therefore you can infer from that to the idea that quote unquote reality doesn't have a will. But then all you're talking about here is the set of contingent things, and you're not seeing that we've already made a distinction between that set and the necessary existence. And so then when we're talking about the necessary existence, there is no other way of explaining this other than having the ability to choose. There's nothing acting upon it, making it do anything. Whatever actions are coming from it, whatever effects come from it, are self-determined. And this is about as free as a will as you're going to get. And then on top of that, with what you've just said, can you repeat what you just mentioned there about you can imagine these things as having a will, but
a deterministic will. Basically, I have a will that's derived from a arena of faculties of external factors like my existence, my brain, my parents, my society, everything like that brings me to figure out what I like, what I don't like, what I think is right and wrong, true and false. Okay. All of those things are from external factors, which are influences that could have caused me to believe that something is right or wrong.
But this is great though, bro, because for us, not for you, because if you're willing to concede here that all of these things, despite being determined, have will, then you have to admit that whatever this necessary being is has a will that is not determined, therefore has a free will. Because if you're willing to acknowledge
if it's determined by other causes and this necessary being is independent, there's no other causes determining it.
Is this necessary being bound by his nature? For example, can this necessary being you guys are speaking about, can it lie? Can it sin? Can it choose? Well, I'm not going to say choose not to exist because that's kind of stupid, but can it do those things? Like it's bound by its own nature, which means there's some deterministic attributes there.
See, I would say this. I would say the problem with those types of questions is that it sort of goes a bit too further to where we're at. So we're at a being, and then we're trying to say, okay, does a necessary being, is it some sort of mechanical force within the universe that has no consciousness, no will, and therefore was forced to create? So we're trying to move the discussion from there to a will, and then we can start talking about other properties. And I mentioned the point. I said, if we say reality exists, we're saying, reality is reality. We're saying reality is either a contingent being and a necessary being, isn't it? And we're saying, well, contingent beings don't explain their own existence. A necessary being does explain its own existence by necessity. It has to exist independently. And that the necessary being causes the contingent beings to exist. Yeah. Now, that causal relationship, is it something that is forced or compelled upon the necessary being, like a mechanical force? Now, if it's forced or compelled, the problem is that then the possible beings have to have always existed, because everything sufficient for the necessary being to bring the effect into being or cause the effect always exists.
I agree.
Yeah. So therefore, if the effect comes in at a point in time or begins, then it means that the necessary being, having all of these necessities, not having anything external to itself, the only explanation we have open to us is that it chose. And this goes back to that example I gave earlier. I don't know if you heard the example of SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The reason why they look for it, how they look for intelligence, is they say, is there a signal in the universe that doesn't have a naturalistic origin, that cannot be explained by some physical law? If there's something that cannot be explained by physical law, then it's an indication of intelligence. Yeah. And we're saying that this necessary being doesn't depend upon any physical laws outside of itself. It therefore chooses to create possible beings.
So basically what you're saying is that we're on the same page with a necessary being. We're not on the same page with an eternal causal principle for the universe itself, for existence itself. You're saying that for things to change or for something to be caused, there needs to be a will implemented with this necessary being to be able to change the state of something.
So
because if reality... Go ahead.
I was going to say, we also agree that contingent things began to exist, don't we?
Yes.
Okay, so we agree there's a necessary eternal cause and there's an effect of contingent beings which began to exist. Yeah. Now, if we explain the necessary being as a mechanical force, then if the cause is eternal, the effect would be what?
If the cause is eternal, the effect would be non-eternal.
No, it would be eternal. If everything sufficient to cause an effect exists, then you're going to have an effect, isn't it?
I thought you meant the creation itself would be eternal. I'm like, no, the creation, like we are the effect of what's necessary being caused. So we would be contingent at that point.
Right. So the point here is this is one of four arguments we mentioned here, but this one argument is saying, okay, if you've got an eternal cause that has no choice to create, then the effect would have to be
eternal.
Exactly. But because we have not an eternal effect, we have a temporal effect, then what can we say about the eternal cause then? Didn't have to create, did it? It did not have to cause the effect. just repeat after me. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, right. I already got it pulled up right here on my other monitor.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And you guys have been talking to me about this for months, and I've just trying to been able to wrap my head around it. And to be completely honest, look up arguments to completely tear this down.
Yeah,
I've yet to find any, but
that's just one argument. Remember, the other arguments as well, Justin, are like, for example, after last time's show, we had discussions. You had discussion with Hartim and the other brothers here as well about consciousness. And we agree, and you've now you've rejected materialism. I think you're still on that, aren't you? So you rejected materialism. You believe consciousness cannot be explained by physicality or physicalism. There must be something that is external to the material realm that caused consciousness.
You take a baby step towards a shahada here, Justin.
Yeah. So I'm just saying is that
slowly.
There's so many different ways of looking at this question. All of them seem to always point to a necessary being that has conscious awareness of what it did, or what it caused. I don't want to push it, Justin, because I know it's
have a think about it, bro. Let it.
I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it.
A couple more days.
Yeah,
so
don't be afraid to keep pushing.
So, Justin, remember, this argument does not necessarily lead you to Islam. It leads you to theism. But the next step about Islam, and there's a few steps, but one of the key steps would be, is what religion best explains this necessary being? Yeah. So which divine can, lots of people claim to have received this revelation from this necessary being that has a will, consciousness, intelligence, that created through intentionality. What best explains it?
Well, that's an easy step. That's an easy step that I've already been doing. I mean, I've already been on that step as an atheist. Like, as an atheist, you can even do that. Use the process of elimination, looking at other religions and seeing like, oh boy, this ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've already kind of been doing that, and like I said, the few that are left are Judaism and Islam.
Yeah.
So now, how do we push Judaism out of this?
Well, before we do that, I mean, we have to get you to agree that the necessary being is God, or at least something like it, if you're not fine with the word God.
But to be honest, it sounds like he's already there. Like, if he's saying now it's either Judaism or Islam, then I think at the moment
I want you to take your shahada
He's
right
got to
now,
say it.
but then I think
he's got to change
also,
empathetic atheist.
No, he's got to take the hat off, man. Just all right.
So Justin, you do realize, right, Justin, that there are. I just think you have to know. I think you do know this, but you have to take into consideration that there are responses to these arguments from the atheist side. There's a lot of back and forth, right? So it's not like. Right? It's not like there isn't a discussion to be had, but what we're telling you is that all in all, this is a very strong case. And I would argue that based on all this evidence, even if I'm making a weaker case, that it is just rational. There is some rationale to believe in God. Let's say, I think the stronger case is very doable, that God does exist, a deductive case. But even if I'm making the weaker case that there is a rationale to believe in God, and that there's this kind of like epistemic permissiveness in this whole atheism, theism discussion, that there is a rational basis through which you can adopt theism, and your worldview as an atheist entails that the truth about these existential and philosophical questions, in the absence of the existence of God, doesn't even matter. I mean, it's like truth. Your truth-bearing faculties can be good in terms of your survivability and in terms of benefiting you here and now, but in terms of these, complex and deep existential questions, in the absence of the existence of God, the truth of these questions or propositions is literally meaningless in that bigger nihilistic picture of atheism. So keeping that in mind and looking at the other side and saying, hey, there's a rational basis from that, yet choosing to remain as an atheist when it doesn't even matter if you're an atheist on atheism is quite irrational. It's straightforwardly irrational, I think. Right. So yeah, man, go for it.
I've purchased tickets to go to the Faithless Forum in June, so I have to hold on for a couple more. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think you should.
They allow theists there. Don't worry, Justin.
I know. You could be repping it for our side when you go there.
Yeah, just piss all the YouTubers off.
But so can we just ask now? So, have you moved from at the beginning of the stream saying that the necessary cause doesn't have a will to accepting that there is a good case to say that it does?
I'm accepting that there is a good case to say that it does.
Yeah. That's all we're asking. So
there's also a good case to say that we can't show that other minds exist. But I mean, I don't think any of us here are solipsists. So that's going to be something to sit down and think on.
All right, but the question is is that a problem you inclined to? Do you doubt the existence of your children?
Say that again?
Do you doubt the existence of your children when you look at them?
No.
So it's not really a problem for you?
No.
All right, so we don't even need to cover that.
He's saying that if you use the same epistemic approach, justification towards other minds, for example, our children, then we can use the same principle when it comes to the necessary being.
I have a daughter, there's no amount of argumentation that people are going to be able to give me that's going to doubt whether or not my daughter is another mind and can experience pain in order for me to kind of neglect or disregard pain being caused on her by someone.
Or being skeptical either. Isn't
Yeah. There's zero skepticism with regards to the existence of my daughter and that she is another mind and that she is capable of experiencing pain. Mm-hmm. And like, I'm heavily convinced of that. And that, like, I don't care. And I know how deep into these philosophical labyrinths we can get and how confusing things can become when you ponder on them a little too much. But it's in the same way as when you're looking at words and they cease to stop looking like words. I make it equivalent to that. For me, there isn't a problem with other conscious. I think you exist. I think you are a being. I think we are having a back and forth now. And there's things rattling in your mind, there's things rattling in our mind, and we're enjoying each other's company. I don't think there's a problem with that. And so that would only be an issue if you even considered that seriously. But I really don't think you do. So I really don't think this is an impediment to anything that we've given you so far. So then I kind of just put it to you again. Like, so are you moving from the stage of accepting that there's at least good arguments? I'm not telling you, right, Shahada time. I'm just saying, is there a good argument to suggest that this necessary being has a will, is self-determined, and not acted upon from external causes? Do you think we've made that position well? And are you at least willing to sort of move
I
into
concede to that. You have good arguments to show that the necessary being has a will.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So that's I guess one step closer to the Shahada, at least.
I've been moving quickly lately. Damn.
You have. These conversations of ours.
Got rid of materialism, got rid of determinism.
But
like I say,
I moved to deism.
I think it's something to dwell on for a little bit. Let it marinate. Like I say, you're making progress, alhamdulillah, and I think, inshallah.
I'm just trying to be open-minded.
Yeah. No, that's good. Don't worry. And I think, like I say, I'm enjoying our conversations, and I think all the other brothers do as well. So just keep at it.
We'll talk about this again, Justin. I want to talk to you about the modal epistemological argument. Sounds fancy, right? But it can be relevant because it's it has to do with how even if our advancement develops, no matter what situation you're in, you know, your epistemic position can't really change with regard to your position on an agent that caused the existence of the universe. Yeah. It's not going to change. It's so we can have that discussion too. Cool. And
Sharif, you missed it. I said my Shahada while you were gone.
I was listening. You know, the problem is, for some reason on this stream, I can't hear Abdurrahman. So every time he speaks, I have to put my YouTube on to listen to him.
Jump out and jump back in.
Maybe I'll try that.
It'll take a second. Do it now. Just leave studio and join again.
I might miss Justin's Shahada though.
that ain't happening today, but I won't say that it won't happen in the future.
Inshallah. We'll keep you in our prayers. May Allah guide you to
any last words, Justin, that you want to say, or anything that?
No, I normally end my shows a certain way, but I'm not gonna say that on your show.